right. Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret. My name is Jeff Sharon. Along with me, my usual cohorts, Brian Murphy and Eric Lopez. And joining us now to talk some big-time basketball news, the one, the only, number one in your hearts, number 4 on your roster program, Mike O'Donnell, joining us here for the first time in a while. Hi, Mike.
How we doing, guys? Thanks for having me.
Good to see you. How's quarantine life treating you?
You know, I think I don't even know how you answer that question anymore, right? Because it just seems new every day. But I am, as you know, Jeff, you've known me for a long time. I am probably inappropriately optimistic with everything, and so a family is healthy and happy, and even though the kids are driving me absolutely crazy, I get to make up for some lost time from a lot of traveling during college hoop season. So I'm very thankful for that. I am very tired, but we're healthy and happy. So I consider that a blessing.
Well, it's good to see you. I'm glad everybody's doing okay. We got Brian and Eric are here with us. And the reason why we brought you on, first of all, thanks for spending time with us. It's been a while. And we were looking forward to seeing, last time we were talking basketball with anybody, everything was getting shut down. But, it's been a wild off season, but the wild off season just got a little bit wilder with the news from UCF that we've got a new, the first ever 5-star in the history of UCF is coming over as a transfer. CJ Walker, who is originally from Sanford, played at Oak Ridge, went to school initially at Oregon, and decided to put up a post a couple of days ago saying that he wanted to be a little bit closer to his family, and has now announced that he is committed to coming to UCF, and is the first ever 5-star in UCF history. Granted, not out of high school, but whatever, we'll take it. First of all, when you heard the news that he was coming down, what'd you think?
Well, it's such a huge addition to the roster. It's a much needed addition to the roster. I think Coach Dawkins has learned, it's hard to, right? It's the nature of the business, right? It's really hard to get those guys right out of high school, right? Because you might be going to the Oregons, Kentuckys, Dukes, Carolinas, but there is a ton of talent in Orlando, and if it doesn't work the first year, I think everybody, I think for CJ Walker, you got to understand that he was recruited hard by Coach Dawkins and his staff coming out of high school. But I think when you're showing a lot of love coming out of high school, and then you go to a situation that you think you made your best decision and it didn't work, and then you're like, wait a second, I want to go to where I'm comfortable and where I think my gut felt right. I think it was a pretty easy decision for him. I think he had a great relationship with Coach Dawkins. You're getting to get a chance to play in front of your family. And I mean, that's the guy that your average basketball fan in Orlando will want to watch, because just of how athletic and his potential's kind of through the roof. So I was ecstatic to see him come back to his hometown team.
Yeah, he's listed at 6'8", 200. Last year for Oregon, he played in 28 games, averaged 4 points and 2.5 rebounds in, obviously relatively limited action, only 14.9 minutes per game. But, all you got to do is just do a quick little search on YouTube and see how athletic this guy really is. Go ahead, Brian. I know you wanted to ask Mike.
Well, I just think, Mike, in general, when you talk about CJ Walker and what he brings, is he the best player of the Dawkins era? And if so, has there been a player of this caliber, just athletically, naturally gifted, that we've seen at UCF?
That second question is a really hard question. I'm going to think about it while I'm answering your first question. By the way, your beard is fantastic, Brian. It's outstanding.
Thank you, Mike. I've been trying to tell him this for weeks now.
I always have beard envy because I feel like I'm still going through puberty and I just can't do that. I would love to do it. I don't have the enough testosterone in my body to pull it off. So well done, my friend. Well done. I don't. You can't say he's going to be the best player in the Dawkins era because we just don't know yet, right? I mean, I think even CJ would tell you that he didn't play. I think if you ask CJ, he would tell you, I didn't play to my potential that first year at Oregon. I think he, along with Dawkins and the rest of the coaching staff, is going to learn how good CJ Walker can be. I do think he is a guy that absolutely has all the tools to be an NBA player. Mm-hmm. If you ask me right now if he's going to be the best player in the Dawkins era, I would say no, because we haven't seen him in a system that's conducive to his abilities, right? I mean, you guys know this game so well. Like, there are some guys that are just freaks. Like, you put LeBron in any system and he's going to be LeBron. But even 5-star guys, they need a system that will allow them to showcase their skills, right? That's all great. Every coach wants the right players in their system and all that stuff. But if you look at Oregon's system, if you remember that team, that was heavily, heavily relied upon Peyton Pritchard, who was one of the best players in college basketball. And he's a ball-dominant guard. It's a lot of ball screen. He's taking shots. And it survived. Oregon was a very good three-point shooting team. And I think with Dawkins, when I looked at you, CJ Walker, and you say, I'm getting a little off track here, Brian, I'll come back to it. When you look at CJ Walker and you pair him up with Colin Smith, what did Coach Dawkins prove during the greatest year in the history of UCF basketball? He proved that he knows how to coach size and athleticism. And I think if you're CJ Walker, you're like, I love that, because Coach Dawkins, like, there are some coaches that wouldn't know how to coach Taco Fall and Colin Smith and Chad Brown together. Coach Dawkins did that. So when you look at with CJ Walker, I'm excited to see how Dawkins uses him. It's less about using him, and it's more about putting in a position for him to be successful. And that may sound cliche, but it's not easy to do. Some coaches just don't do it, right? It's just your offense or not. So to sum up, I can't say he's going to be the best player that Dawkins ever coached, but I absolutely can say that there's a really good chance that we might be saying that in 2 years. In terms of athleticism, I would have a hard time arguing against, from just a recruit standpoint, him being the most athletic recruit that's ever come into UCF. Now, Jermaine Taylor was just an absolute freak and an animal. The David Dykite was just a ridiculous athlete. Aubrey Dawkins was an amazing athlete, but it's going to be hard. I think when he suits up, if he gets eligible, which I think he will immediately, I think it's going to be hard to find someone more athletic than CJ. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, wow, they do have to cross that hurdle, right, with the eligibility still. But you're thinking that he'll get through okay?
If I had to
who knows, really?
Right. If I had to flip a coin, if he's transferring because of the pandemic and to be closer to home because of family, because there might be health concerns, I would be surprised if the NCAA didn't work with that. If he transferred home just because he wanted to be closer to home, right, that's a harder thing to pull off. But we are in a pandemic, this sounds terrible to say, but you should use that to your advantage if you're trying to play right away.
Yeah, that would make sense. Give us a comp on what kind of player he is, you think. You've mentioned, you even tweeted it out when the news came out, that you think if he's eligible that he'll help UCF maybe have the best front court in the American.
Oh, yeah.
So those are my two questions. Give us a comp either of a previous UCF player or maybe just a college basketball player in general that you would compare him to, so that those that may not be familiar with him can kind of relate to, oh, that's the type of player he can be. And then why do you feel that how he will fit with Colin and then the rest of the front court that you think could be the best in the league?
So a player comp I would use for CJ Walker, he doesn't play this hard yet, but when you I've been to practices and I know Coach Dawkins well. You don't have a choice. You're either going to play. You're going to play to your biggest potential in terms of effort, your highest effort potential for Dawkins. You're just not going to play, right? He's old school in that standpoint, which I love. I think it fits the UCF brand really well. He doesn't play as hard as Kevin Garnett, but when you're talking about length, athleticism, and kind of skill around the rim, he has Kevin Garnett qualities. I'm not saying he is Kevin Garnett, but the way he moves, the way he jumps, the way he can guard multiple positions reminds me a lot of like how wiry and athletic and long Kevin Garnett was coming out of high school. There's a lot of that in his game. And the front court conversation, the reason why I tweeted that out is if it was just CJ Walker, I would say I wouldn't have said that. If it was just CJ Walker and Colin Smith, I may not have tweeted that out. But what a lot of people are forgetting is how important Sean Mobley is going to be to this UCF team. He has one of the best basketball IQs I've ever been around. He is totally opposite of Colin Smith and CJ Walker in the way that he plays. He is a point forward in that if you asked Sean Mobley to bring it up the court and initiate the offense, he could. And then if you asked him to sit to be in a pick and roll, he could do that. Where, he's a better perimeter shooter than Colin Smith, but he's not as athletically gifted. But he is, when I watch him at VCU, and I've known Sean for a long time, Sean's one of the best passing forwards in college basketball. I believe that. His vision, the way he orchestrates, is fantastic. And a lot of it's not going to show up in the stat sheet. He might be the best hockey assist passer for a big man, quote unquote big man, I've ever seen. He is all about the offense first, and he's less about his stats. And that just complements Colin Smith so well already. It was already going to be a really good front court. Then you add CJ Walker in, who plays more above the rim than Colin Smith and Sean Mobley do combined. You've got a guy who's just ferocious around the rim. You've got Colin Smith, who's so good in the one-on-one. And you've got Sean Mobley, who can step out to the three, and he can drive a kick like he's a guard. So the high-low capabilities, the way there's going to be mismatches, if you're utilizing it correctly, it's going to be hard to emulate. It's going to be hard for an opposing team to emulate that in practice.
Looking at the potential starting five for next year, Mike. So I'm thinking, based on what you were saying with the front court, it's going to be Colin, it's going to be CJ Walker, and the news that Colin Smith is coming back was obviously welcome news to everybody the last couple of days. And then you're also saying that Sean Mobley will also start in the front court. And you're thinking, are you thinking also it'll in the backcourt it'll likely be Darius Perry and Darren Green Jr.? Is that what you think would be a good starting five, at least to start out?
That's a heck of a starting five. I mean, that's a top five starting five at least in the American. Darius Perry's really good. Remember he signed up for a different system. He signed up under a Patino system, and then that system changed when Chris Mack became the head coach. So again, we talk about guys are really talented. There's plenty of talent, but a lot of times the system can really benefit a player. He is so good in the open court. He's so good one-on-one, and just a ridiculously underrated passer. A guy like Darius Perry will probably he's going to want to average 20 a game, but he could average 10 to 12 assists a game if he totally embodies the point guard system. Because think about the way the court is spread, right? So if you're trying to spread the court out, and Dawkins loves ball screens, so you're telling me you've got 3 guys on the court at any given time that can be in a ball screen with Darius Perry. So if it's Colin Smith, he's going to pick and roll and catch mid-range and do his thing, right? Or around the rim. If it's CJ Walker, it's pick and roll, throw it up anywhere around the rim, and he's going to go get it. And if it's Sean Mobley, it's probably going to be pick and pop. So you've got to prepare for pick and pop, pick and roll, pick and lob with 3 different guys. I mean, that's tough. So, yeah, Darius Perry would absolutely be the starting guard. And then if you're worried about the roll action so much, just stick Darren Green on the other wing, and it's skip, and he's the best 3-point shooter in the American Conference entering conference play. So that would be the starting lineup. And then you got Tony Johnson coming off the bench, as well as a number of other guys. And I just think this is an awfully talented lineup. It really is.
Yeah, there's so many options. Even I thought yesterday we were kind of going over this in some of our group chats, and I mentioned that Dre Fuller could start, but you got also Brandon Mahan, and there's just a ton of guys.
Well, think about the bench, but Brian, to your point, think about the bench.
Yeah,
right? I mean, like to me, Darius Perry, I just think he's going to be the starting point. It's a no-brainer. And Darren Green, you're not going to have the best 3-point shooter in the American Conference come off the bench, because you're also going to want to spread the floor so you've got more room for the bigs to operate around the rim. The guys you just mentioned coming up, Dre Fuller and Brandon Mahan coming off the bench, not to mention the freshmen who are also really talented. We could see the makings of the most talented team that Coach Dawkins has ever coached, at least on par with the BJ Taylor, Aubrey Dawkins, Taco Fall team. It's pretty close from top to bottom.
That's big. That's huge. That's a big statement you just made there. I mean, I think that's very well, because as you know, I mean, there's people out there that have been, well, can Coach Dawkins recruit? I think this is an exclamation point answer of yes, he can, after putting this roster together here, not just with the transfers, but even the freshmen and guys like the Darren Greens. They've really been mixing in all these guys.
Not easy, though. Not easy to find PT for everybody. Guys get frustrated, right? Not easy to find shots for everybody. The thing to where this UCF team is going to be most successful is if I was to take a guess, I wouldn't want to have a go-to guy on this team. If this UCF team, especially if CJ Walker, again, that's something that we do have to keep saying, if he is immediately eligible this season, do all of those guys want to be a piece of a puzzle to get back to the NCAA tournament? If they can honestly answer that question, they can say yes. There's just not many teams that are going to be able to stack up with them from a front court, and there's not many teams that are going to be as deep. If your 8th, 9th guy coming off the bench was Florida's Mr. Basketball, that's big time. I mean, like that's really, really good. So that's exciting to think about as fans, right? And it's exciting to talk about from a radio podcast perspective. Now comes the hard part for Coach Dawkins. How do I take this amoeba and put it into a shape that's ultimately going to be consistent, right? And is going to provide enough PT, enough points, enough confidence for everybody to commit to the larger vision. It's not easy to do, but I would rather have that problem than being frustrated of where are we going to get points from, where are we going to get shots from, right? It's a double-edged sword there.
Well, go ahead, Brian. I'm sorry.
Well, I think everybody should have faith in Johnny to handle all those moving parts, because that does come down to coaching.
That's what you signed up for, right?
Right. That's his job, and he's so good at that. And, you look at his tenure here, in years in which UCF maybe fell short of expectations, you could not put an ounce of that on coaching. It's never been his fault for anything that they've come up short on. So when they've got the pieces in place and they're healthy, please, things work out because he's really good at putting these pieces together.
I agree with that. I think Coach Dawkins would always blame himself, though. He's just that old school wired guy, which is honestly, it's refreshing to me. I don't think we get enough honesty, from coaches. So.
Well, that's one of the things also that, I mean, and this cuts across sports too, Mike, is that, I personally have always thought that the mark of a good coach is they adapt the system to their players, not the players to their system, right? And I think that there are coaches who come from both schools and have very good reasons for doing that. But, Johnny has proven himself to be the guy who likes to adapt his system to those players. You play with the hand you're dealt, right?
The offense and defense of the NIT team versus the NCAA tournament team was totally different.
Yeah,
with a lot of the same guys, and that's what coaching is. Your job is to adjust to win, not to adjust to be comfortable.
Obviously, CJ made this decision, and he's stated explicitly that he wants to be closer to family. He has some ill relatives that he wants to be closer to. But can you see, Mike, his decision to come to UCF maybe open up the eyes of this class of athlete and show them that you can come to UCF. You can be a top 30 national prospect and go to UCF. We can make you here. Or do you think that this is a kind of a one-off special exception?
I don't know I don't think it would be a one-off exception. I think the reality for the next couple of years is it's still going to be really hard to get those guys coming out of high school. But I think it kind of in parallel with the reality of what I just said, I also think like the former 5-star recruit that maybe went to a Kentucky or Kansas that didn't have, especially a Central Florida, because Central Florida basketball talent's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Goes into a system that's like, I went for the name and I didn't study the system. That's really why most guys actually transfer. They go for the name and they don't research the system. I'm a testament to that. I think you'll see the transfer market flood a little bit more, for UCF. And now too, Brian, you gotta think about players are recruiting other players now more than ever. You look at, the AAU team that CJ Walker played for, the high school. I mean, it's just constant, big time recruits that come out of those programs. And now more than ever, you want to play with your boys. You want to play with your buddies. And absolutely, CJ Walker could be a guy that I think he would, if you're a coach, you still got to recruit, but I think players want to play with their boys now. More, and I think we're seeing more recruiting, player to player than we've ever had before. So that could be even a bigger frame of reference, Brian, as well.
I want to ask you, you mentioned earlier Mr. Florida basketball, which normally that in itself is exciting. Isaiah Adams, first ever Mr. Florida basketball to play at UCF. B.J. Taylor was a runner-up in 2014. Tell us a little bit about him, because that's also a big noteworthy recruit. I mean, this is, to me, in a lot of ways, a historic offseason for UCF basketball from a recruiting standpoint.
Yeah, so he is Isaiah Adams. You're exactly right. I mean, it really is maybe the best recruiting year now that you count CJ Walker in the history of UCF. Isaiah Adams he's not a guy who's going to come in and give you 30, right? What people rave about, and when you watch him play, is that his motor is off the charts good, and that's what really attracted Coach Dawkins to Isaiah Adams. Is that he lives to block shots. He is we always talk about the gazelle out there on the court. When he runs, he's one of those guys. He runs and it looks like he's floating, right? Or he's floating around the rim. There's a lot of similarities between CJ Walker and Isaiah Adams. It's almost like Isaiah is a little bit of a younger version, except Isaiah is a fantastic rebounder and gets probably almost half of his points off rebounds. I mean, he is a guy who in high school, grab a rebound defensively, push it in full court and go dunk on the other end. Now, probably not going to happen as often in college, but his motor and his ability to glide like effortlessly is what really kind of attracts a lot of coaches to his game. And you want that guy out on the open floor. You want him with a really great passing guard, right? You want him with a guy who can find him in the open floor, catch rip at the 3-point line, get to the rim, and he's got a little bit of that. Remember, Aubrey Dawkins remember watching him play and he would dunk and you'd be like, and the average fan would be like, oh, nice dunk. The guys that know hoop are like, that was insane. He makes like the good look average. That's kind of Isaiah, like athletic plays. He makes the really good athletic play look average. And he's a special kid. He really is.
Yeah, I think back to that, to the obviously the Duke game and Aubrey's final game, and I think back to his performance that day was, like you said, he made it what he was doing look easy and so smooth, and that was against NBA talent. And when you compare that to Isaiah Adams and you mentioned obviously his love for blocking shots and rebounding, not too bad for a kid who's listed at 6'6", that he plays that much higher above his height, right?
Yeah, he was a 20 and 10 guy in high school.
Yeah.
There's 20 points, 10 rebounds. You got to have a motor. Rebounding is no, okay. This isn't good podcast, material, but like,
yes, it is. It always
95% of rebounding is. It wasn't on you. It was on me. I'm a geek about this stuff. 95% of rebounding is effort. You can have the best boxing out form all you want, but if you don't have the effort, and if you have to combine effort and anticipation. And you can't just have one. It doesn't work like that. You've got to be able to split the two. It's got to be even. It doesn't. You have to have. If you're going to have effort, you have to have a huge amount of anticipation and understanding where the ball is going to go. But you love that as a player like this, because that, to me, a guy like that, if a guy's a great rebounder, there's a really good chance he's coachable, because that just means that most great rebounders are doing the work that nobody else wants to do. And there's a little bit of there's some selflessness in that I think is attractive to a lot of coaches. But further on that, you've got, again, we go back to the talent of this team, Mr. Basketball of Florida, right? On paper, you were the best high school basketball player in the state of Florida. You're going to come off the bench. What do you do with that, right? Will his effort be tainted because all of a sudden he's not the guy? How will Coach Dawkins and coaching staff, motivate him and use that and try to teach him that, you're playing behind a potential all-conference guy, you're playing behind a potential a five-star. I mean, you've got to think about all that stuff where it's exciting, but he's coming on. He's probably going to come off the bench. He might start again. Coach Dawkins. The one thing about Coach Dawkins, you guys have seen how often the lineup changes. If you don't bring it in practice, you're not playing. You're not playing. So could a guy like Isaiah Adams come in and start? Absolutely. Like if he beats out Sean Mobley in the starting lineup, I mean, it's going to be because of effort and practice.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at other Mr. Florida winners, those guys, like, recently, like Vernon Carey's and Kevin Knox, those guys came in and were the guy from the jump, right? And so he needs to adjust to that. And that comes down to coaching too. I know Dawkins does like to redshirt the freshmen. You wouldn't see that Isaiah might be redshirted.
I'd be shocked. Yeah. I just think, with all this talent, now it's a guy like that. You probably don't want a red shirt because a guy like that could start for you. Where the red shirt comes in is if you don't know where you're going to find playing time, if you're unsure if he's physically ready, if you're unsure if his skills are going to translate, if you're unsure if you're even going to find him 5 minutes. With a guy like Isaiah Adams, this again, I'm not speaking for Coach Dawkins. I just think when you've got that much talent, when you got that great a motor, he's a Dawkins guy. Like that, those are the guys you want on the floor. You know, him backing up Colin Smith. How great is that if you substitute out a guy's potential all-conference player for a Florida Mr. Basketball? Like that's a great thing, you know. So I just don't think I can't see it. I can't see it happening.
All of this is obviously contingent on whether or not we have a full season, of course. Reality as it is with COVID-19, and obviously we're still in early July. A lot can happen between now and November, but we're still kind of, you know, things are, at least right now, not exactly trending in the right direction here in the state of Florida. You've talked to coaches, you've talked to players all throughout this offseason. You've got a sense of what's going on. What is the general sense of coaches and administrators that you know about what kind of a season we're going to have this year, assuming it goes off?
Well, first, most players want to play, but also most players don't really have an idea of what's going on. That's just the reality. Coaches, most coaches are wired like, hey, my finger got cut off, but I'm just going to put a Band-Aid on it, and I'm going to coach the next day, right? That's the way coaches are wired across basically every single sport, you know, especially football. This is just uncharted territory. Here's the way you've got to look at it. And this is talking with a lot of coaches, a lot of ops directors, a lot of administrators. It's not about the virus. And I say that to say I'm not taking light of it. I mean, everybody's taking it seriously. It's about the logistics and the protocols that go along with how you operate inside of a pandemic, right? So here's a really good example. I won't name the team, but there's a team. I'll just say it's not UCF, okay? But there's a team that a lot of other schools are following. And right now, here is the setup. The player tests positive. That can be asymptomatic or symptomatic. It doesn't matter, right? Player tests positive. That player has to sit out, right, for 2 weeks. I'll come back to that in a second. So you got 2 weeks of quarantining. Then you have to contract trace the day before. Who is that player with? Okay, let's just use football as an example. If that player was with 12 of the football players, those 12 football players are now being asked to quarantine for a full week. So you've got 13 football players at least out a week. Okay, you can't have a season like that. And then if you follow even further, what a lot of schools are doing is after someone tests positive, you go through a 2-week additional conditioning quarantine to test your conditioning and make sure your respiratory levels are not dramatically or affected at all by testing positive for COVID-19. So you could potentially have, if that's the protocol for a lot of schools and conferences, you could have your quarterback out for 4 weeks. Even more important from a football standpoint, what if it's 2 offensive linemen? Imagine having two starting offensive linemen out for 2 weeks. 4 weeks. You can't do it if that's the protocol. Here's the problem with that. That's the extreme, but there's a good chunk of schools that are doing that. Notre Dame tests every week. They test their players every week. Arkansas tests players when only they're symptomatic. All of Arkansas Athletic they're just testing players that are only symptomatic. Here's the scary thing, and this is just being honest. If you ask me, like Jeff, if you said, Mike, put yourself as an 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old kid at UCF. You guys remember I wasn't very athletically gifted, but I just had to survive being the hardest working guy on the court. Like, that's just who I was. That's who I am. That's the way I played. And a lot of guys are wired like that, especially at the high level. of if I'm sick, I'm brushing it off. Guys, I memorized the concussion test so that I could get out of missing games and practices if I had concussion symptoms. Truly, I memorized the test.
Wow.
By the way, I had 5 concussions at UCF. Probably had like 8.
You had 5?
5, yeah. So I would never tell anybody if I was sick, ever. I didn't want to miss practice. I didn't want to miss a game. I was just wired to be the tough son of a gun because I was doing the thing that I loved and nothing was going to interrupt me from doing the thing that I loved, not even the antibodies in my like that sounds stupid to say and think, but that's the way I was wired. And that's the way that thousands and thousands of guys are wired, right? So you look at a school like Arkansas, who is only testing for symptoms. I mean, are you kidding me? Absolutely. If I had symptoms, I wouldn't say I had symptoms because I wouldn't want to miss practice or a game. Think about the mental health of the athletes. And if we're trying to quarantine during the season, if you're trying to be alone in your dorm room for 2 weeks straight during the season, let's say you were healthy, you went all the way through it. We just got out of a pandemic. You might have been home for 3-4 months, not able to leave your house, especially if you're up in the Northeast. Now, if you're in Florida, you're being asked to quarantine at home. You're not supposed to be doing anything outside of going to the grocery store. And then you get back to campus. You start playing. You fall back in love with your teammates, playing the game, the coaching staff, the film sessions, the practices. And then I'm asymptomatic. I test positive, but I'm asymptomatic. You've got to sit out for 2 weeks. I would mentally really, really, really struggle with that because I think that what I would do is coming back from that 2 weeks of being quarantined, I would try to make up for those lost 2 weeks, which isn't the right thing to do. But I guarantee you that some of those initial practices and games would suffer because I'm thinking that from a competitor-only standpoint of where I can't let my team down again. I got to play even better than I did. And every time you try to do that, you never end up performing at your highest level because you're overthinking it and you're trying to do things out of your comfort zone. So that was a little bit of a rant, and I'm sorry. What I'm saying is I think it's really we need a universal protocol for all of college athletics. We need it right now. Because we can't have schools sitting players out for 4 weeks and then other schools only testing when they're symptomatic. It also the reason why we need to have a universal protocol I'm talking NCAA, just a complete oversight. You can't treat the athletes like a petri dish, man. Like you can't do it. Can't do it. You guys know me. I think we need to figure out a way to play. I just don't want to treat the athletes like a petri dish. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be, it's the part that I get worried about is how are you going to justify to student athletes in any sport that, oh, you go play for our entertainment here and run through all these protocols and do all the stuff that you're normally doing as normal as possible. But, oh, by the way, we're not going to allow any other students on campus, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right.
I mean, if I was a student athlete, I'd be losing my mind at that. I'm like, wait a second, am I a student then?
Well, here's the reality: is I think most athletes don't care if their students on campus; they want to play. Parents are the ones that will be the most concerned about this, and rightfully so. I would feel the same way. If your university is saying it's not safe to be on campus, what are we doing? You know what I mean? Like, what are we actually, what are we really doing here?
Right.
We have to trust. There has to come to a time where, I'm in the middle on this, right? I mean, I think I tweeted this out the other day. Like, I don't believe this thing is a hoax by any stretch of the imagination, but I also don't believe this thing is the end of the world. Where's the middle ground? If science is telling us, and our leadership, the presidents of schools are saying it's not safe to have students on campus right now. I mean, what are we really doing here? You can't ask the athletes to do that. And that's where coaching the head coaches need to come in and say, okay, like let's pump the brakes here for a second and figure this thing out. But we could talk about this for days and weeks. The reality is every school in every state is operating differently.
Yeah.
And
that's
tough. That's tough. That's why I'm all for spring ball, football, basketball. I think there's something cool to be said to having just a huge spring season of all sports. Not to say there's being a guarantee of a vaccine, but if you gave leadership, if you formed a committee and you gave leadership, okay, what is it? Are we in June? We're in July. I don't even know, guys.
I know.
Quarantine.
I don't either.
July, August. Okay, July, August, September, October, November, December. If you gave them 6 months to develop a plan, like presidential leadership, NCAA leadership, you can bash the NCAA all you want. I mean, those guys are still really smart. I've got to think in 6 months' time, you're going to be able to come up with a really great universal protocol to start this thing. Because if you don't play, you talk about a lot of money thrown around in college athletics. You're about to see a lot of programs completely dissipate.
Well, and Mike, and to back that, I mean, there's 347 basketball programs in Division I. I mean, a lot of focus on football, but that's 347. A lot of basketball programs are out there. And I think you mentioned this, and I want to give a shout out because you're on weekly with Mark Daniels on the Beat of Sports on 96.9, the game on iHeart in Orlando. And I think you brought up the idea you could actually play the season starting in February. Just expand on that idea that you brought up on the radio.
Well, it's just kind of like I like to just push it back. If we just don't know, if we're clueless, because none of us are doctors or scientists, I'm all for listening to scientists. But I refuse to cower in fear. So let me find the middle ground. The middle ground for me is I don't know what this is yet. I need more time to figure out what this is. So why don't we push it back to February at the earliest? And go February, March, April, May, and maybe get to May and do May Madness,
May
Mayhem. Change it up for one season. Football, the same thing, pushing it back just so we have more information. I just think more information gives us a better plan. You guys know me. We should figure out a way to play. I don't see a way in which we can play safely in the fall. I don't. We're all going to have to live with this virus forever. It's not going anywhere. We're all going to have to figure out a way to work and carry on our lives to do this. But I'm okay with figuring out a way to do it safely. Like, I don't just want to open up the floodgates and say, go crazy. Let's figure out a safe way to do it. Time gives us a plan. That's why I'd like to see go to February. I think football should get pushed back too to January and February. If you need to push back basketball even longer, and then people will say, Lopez, people will say like, well, what are you going to do about the next season? You push back the time frame a couple months and you start a couple months later. Football and basketball are different. Football needs more time to rest. You need more time to prepare, which is why you probably would want to start. If you had a spring football season, let's just use it as an example. Let's just say you started in February. Okay. If you started in February, help me out, guys, because college football better than I did. If you started in February, when would the season theoretically end?
So if you started early February and pretend like early February is the same as early September, like Labor Day. So you're talking February, March, April, end of April. Conference championship games would be beginning of May. So right around that, beginning of May. So you
beginning of May?
Yeah.
Beginning of May,
right around the beginning of May.
Yeah. You need to you'd need like a month off for the players, and you'd really want to push that back. Like if you normally start in September for college football, just push it back to the end of October. Push it back a month and a half, or even start in November. And then the following season, you'd be able to catch back up again. For basketball, you probably could start back on a normal time frame You could start back in November like you would normally do, because the reality in basketball requires less rest and recovery than football does. Like, you really only need about 2 weeks off to get your body back to feeling healthy for basketball, especially, well, I'm just talking specifically college basketball. You really need about 2-3 weeks off before your body and soul is itching to get back out there on the court. And if you only need 2 or 3 weeks off, you come back to the second semester of summer school and you start normal time in the fall, it would be an easy transition for basketball to push it back.
Would you see? All right, let me ask. So this is the last one I want to ask you about COVID-19. Let's say Mark Emmert called you up tonight and said, "Mike, you're my one-person coronavirus college basketball task force. What do you want the schedule to look like, and how would you set the protocols for all schools at the NCAA level?"
I think anyway, which way you look at it, this season is not going to be played normally. I think you'd condense the non-conference season. I think you'd probably you'd end up looking to cut your non-conference games in half. I think.
Could you see them cutting it to like just cut non-conference altogether, and we start January 1st possibly?
Well, a lot of low to mid-major schools wouldn't be able to survive, because
That's true.
you need that money. You need that visiting team contract money.
Mm-hmm.
And I just can't. You guys know me. I think just the entire idea of Power 5 is just a complete joke, and it's just a sham. And it's like the most ridiculous elitist model of all time. And we talk about equality a lot in sports, and we should, and we need to, and we always have to be on the forefront. Okay, if you're all about equality, then you need to play non-conference games, because there's a lot of schools that need that cash for their budget. Most schools, low to mid-major schools, rely on that for sometimes even half of their budget of going to play at Duke, going to play at UCF too.
Yeah.
It's important for that. I just don't know if we're trying to limit travel. I think cutting the non-conference in half would allow the limitation of some travel. It would allow the season to be a little bit more spread out in case you did need to rest your players more, whatever the case. And I think it would force teams to take non-conference even that much more seriously. And we're just talking college hoops, right, Jeff?
Mm-hmm.
You're not making me the czar for college football too, right? Because I couldn't bear that responsibility.
No. I'm gonna put Lopez in charge of that. But yeah, you're in charge for college basketball.
Dayton needs non-conference for seeding in the NCAA tournament, right? Yeah. Gonzaga needs non-conference, even though it's sad that they do. It's just that's the way it's set up. You need non-conference, but you can't have teams travel all around. If I was in charge of the state of Florida for college basketball, there is absolutely no reason why every single Division I team in the state of Florida should play some type of non-conference tournament. It would completely. If you don't want to do that, you just either have an inflated, lazy ego, or you're completely numb to the quality of basketball that tournament would bring. It would limit travel for teams, especially teams that for Stetson in North Florida, it costs a lot of money to travel across the country to play Missouri or at Kansas. I mean, it's costs a lot of money. If you could get, top 50 net quality games by staying in your state and just driving a couple hours, you should be all for it. And if you're Florida State, if you're UCF, if you're Florida, you want to play that only increases your net. I mean, playing an opening round game against Bethune-Cookman it's the same thing as if you're having Bethune-Cookman as your home opener. And then you have a chance to play Miami and Florida and UCF, Florida Gulf Coast, North Florida. I mean, we talk about teams. North Florida is one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the country last season. You tell me they couldn't upset, and Makes no sense not to do that. The problem why you can't have that universal, Jeff, is Florida's an outlier. Florida and California or North Carolina are outliers. Kansas can't have an 18 tournament in state.
Yeah, but you could maybe do like you divide those into like a couple of different states, right? Like so maybe like Kansas and Nebraska form like a mini region, something like that, right?
You could absolutely, just more travel.
Yeah, a little bit more, but you're right. I mean, there are 13 Division I teams in the state of Florida, and you're right that there's no reason you couldn't put together a decent non-conference.
Well, you could bubble it too.
Event, yeah, you could bubble it too.
You could bubble it, and I think it'd be awesome. I think it'd be awesome if you had a Sunshine State bubble tournament, non-conference tournament. I think it'd be great.
Mike, you and I have been on the Sunshine State tournament bandwagon for a while, and I think it would be so good for the state. It would be so good for the sport too. I'm good. I know you've got to get back to work here. Brian and Eric, did you have anything else you wanted to ask Mike?
No, I just want to say thank you, Mike. This is the most excited I've been in a while since we've been in this pandemic. I just hope we figure it out and get to that basketball season. You and I are basketball junkies. I just hope we get there somehow soon.
Amen.
Yeah, I think we will. I think we should. But I think we should do it safely.
Yeah. Well, here's to you and Annie and the kids staying safe. And here's to hopefully we'll have some more basketball coming our way. Are you going to be how close are you going to be following the NBA stuff? I know that we're all going to be watching it as much as we possibly can on TV, but that's going to be an interesting situation. Have you seen the videos of the guys showing their hotel rooms, by the way?
No, I haven't seen those yet.
Some of them are like they were posting pictures of some of the food they were getting. It's like airline food, basically. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Well, welcome to the real world.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, but no, they'll be all right. They'll be all right. I feel like Disney will take care of them. ESPN will take care of them. Their teams will take care of them. But I think we're all foaming at the mouth for sports. I'm actually excited to not have fans in the stands. I think we're going to get to hear more chatter amongst the players. I think it's pretty cool. I think it'd be fun additional content.
I would love to have every player and every coach mic'd up.
Yeah, man.
And put it on a 10-second delay and just show us what the game is really like in the trenches. I mean, that would be a lot of fun.
That's the future. It's not going to be open the floodgates like that, but that's the future for sure.
That's not hoping. All right, Mike O'Donnell, where can people reach out to you, Mikey?
Well, you can always yell at me via Twitter. It's MOD, the number word, then the number 4, and then the word 3. So MOD for 3. You can always yell at me there. I'm happy to engage in polite and sarcastic conversation with anybody.
And also Star Wars content, obviously.
Sorry, you're breaking up there. Say it again.
I was going to say Star Wars content, obviously, or Marvel
Any
content.
day, man. Yeah, I'm always ready for that, man. I can't wait.
I mean, when's the next
coming out too?
I was going to say season 2 of The Mandalorian's coming out soon, right?
Oh my gosh! I just put it out already. I don't understand what you're waiting for, man. I don't even care if the effects are done. We need more content.
You're okay with seeing grid lines and stuff, right? It's totally fine.
I don't care. I don't care. Line it up. Let's go.
All right, Mike O'Donnell. It's good seeing you, bud. Take it easy. Stay safe, and we'll holler again at you soon. All right.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right.